Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I hope that we have all our guests as well from the nice break of the weather that we had now to join us inside the room for our next discussion, our next panel about energy cooperation and investments, investment drivers towards 2030 with our esteemed guest speakers, a keynote speaker, the ambassador of the United States to the Hellenic Republic, Mr. George Tsunis. We also have with us the CEO of HOWDEN, Greece and Cyprus, Mr. Dimitris Tsesmetzoglou. And I would like to make an announcement about a small modification in the program that Ms. Eleni Vrettou, the CEO of Attica Bank, unfortunately cannot be with us for a serious personal issue. However, we will have with us on the discussion Ms. Valérie Ducrot, who is the Managing Director of the Global Gas Center, who is one of our supporters, long-time supporters of this event as well, coming from us from Geneva. So if I may, I will ask now our speakers to join me in the discussion. Thank you. So, I will start with the ambassador, Ambassador Tsunis. We have been discussing a lot for the past few years how excellent the relationship between Greece and the US has been in many fronts. Obviously, today we are discussing about the energy transition, and the main topic of our three-day conference is energy-related issues. And we have really seen the support and the great influence that the US energy policy has had also to EU/Greek energy developments over the past few years. And among other things, energy security, other than the energy transition, has been very closely interrelated, especially following the invasion of Russia to Ukraine. So, having US LNG embarking and saving the day in many instances here in Europe and particularly in Greece, what do you think is the role of the US now towards the diversification of all the energy sources and the new state of play that we see in the energy sector here in our country?
Thank you very much for your question. I want to give you a very short historical perspective as to why this work, this discussion, this conference is important. Europe essentially for years sole sourced energy to the Russians. And, it was cheaper. They used it as a geostrategic tool, but they also used it in a very extortive manner. So they would shut the spigot off when it suited them. And they undermined democracies by doing so, as they can turn the lights off in the country every time they wanted. So when you talk about energy transition, it's energy diversification and it's sustainability. So with energy diversification, I want to speak to it in terms of what you said, the war in Ukraine, which highlighted the fact that we needed to diversify our energy sources so that we are independent, that everyone is independent, and they won't be under the thumb of Gazprom or the Kremlin. And Europe has done a very good job of doing that. They move very, very quickly. Greece has been a leader in that front. Now, why? Well, by virtue of real estate. A lot of countries that are in dire need of help, like Moldova, which Greece is helping through reverse flow, is landlocked. Serbia, North Macedonia, landlocked. And they traditionally have only received their energy sources from Russia. And those are more difficult problems to fix, but we're actually moving in that direction to do so. Greece, by nature of the fact that it has an expansive coastline, Revithousa, that it had infrastructure that was already in place and by happenstance had been expanded, was in a position to intake LNG. Given that there's over 300 days of sunshine here, they were also in a position to be a leader in renewables. But let me finish the geostrategic argument, which is a diversification of energy. Revethousa, the expansion of Revethousa, FSUs in Revethousa, FSRU in Alexandroupoli, a second FSRU in Alexandroupoli, and 2 or 3 more that are contemplated around the country, in addition to the Greek-Bulgarian interconnector and the one that will build to go to North Macedonia. We were able to diversify the energy that comes in through Greece, making Greece an energy hub and an energy provider to the Balkans and Southeast Europe. Now, that's not only important from a geostrategic point of view, as it deleverages Gazprom, it enhances Greece's geostrategic posture, but it also, it also creates an alternative to Russia. This competition is really important, as Greece is being an energy provider, which leads to prosperity, which leads to peace and stability. So that energy transition, that diversification is very important. Now, it's further important in that we're talking about a sustainable future. Greece has been a leader, a top 10 country in Europe in terms of renewables. That's by virtue of the fact that this is their ethos. There's a lot of sun, there's a lot of wind, and they're transitioning very, very nicely to being a global leader in renewables. And the amount of investments that are being made, many through U.S. companies, whether it be U.S. equipment that's being used, turbines, or the building out of the largest wind park in Greece, or the solar investments. U.S. companies are investing in Greece, not only from an LNG point of view, but from a renewable point of view. So lignite will be, in the very near future, completely out of the energy mix in Greece. That is a good thing, in that it is consistent with our decarbonization goals. As Greece is building out not only renewable infrastructure that will speak to Europe's energy security, but also lead the way in sustainability and decarbonization. So I think what you're doing today is very important, to continue to shine a spotlight on this and continue, as we all continue, the United States, our European allies here, and Greece, to continue to push on this work.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. I will come now to Dimitris. Mr. Tsesmetzoglou, we understand that insurance plays a key role. We had a panel discussion just before our break where this has been exposed as well, that the fact that, is the necessary evil sometimes. That's how we look at insurance. But indeed, this is the main enabler of many investments. Can you tell us a little bit more about that, and what is your view on this running one of the biggest brokerage firms here in Greece?
Well, thank you, Kostas. Thank you. Well, what a day to talk about insurance. At 4 a.m., we had thunderstorms. I had three kids, 2 dogs, and a cat. Luckily, the turtles turned up at 7 a.m. And it was, we see the climate change like we've never seen it before. You cannot foresee what is going to happen. I mean, we had not even near events like that in London, and where you had rain, sun, and snow at the same day. And look what is happening now; it's becoming the norm. So, to be honest, we heard Mr. Mavros talk about the decarbonization, all the Ds, about the digitalization. We have to redesign the insurance sector as well. In many effects, some facts that we know, it's estimated that you're going to have about 9 trillion investments per year for the energy transition in the next decade. This is a huge number, and it requires a huge effort to try and respond and cover all the exposures that come up. Because actually insurance, I think Simon said it before, insurance is the backstop to everything. I mean, you cannot invest unless you have a wrap-up, unless you know that your investment is secure, unless you know that your risks are covered. You cannot protect your balance sheet without insurance. So investments cannot be affected without insurance. And yet again, the insurance industry has not understood well the actual risks that are coming up. Because in insurance, what we do is we look at the past, we model the numbers, we come up with the data, we bring the price, and we give the capacity. Because we can model things and the probabilities of these things happening, of these events happening. Well, how can you model something that is so new as the transition that we're facing going forward? We don't have data. The climate is changing the whole environment. It's things that we cannot foresee. So there's a lot of challenges that are coming up, and people have to invest in the sector because insurance works with investors as well, that they can't actually quite understand what the future brings. And that's a huge challenge. We have, in the next few decades, it's a fact that about 50% of the population will be exposed to extreme events. Either they are heat or floods or whatever. We never had floods in Greece. Look at what's happening now. The biggest event, insurance event ever to hit Greece, it's actually going to be the floods that we had. Since now we thought it was earthquakes. It's not earthquakes, it's floods.
In September.
Yeah, in September, exactly. So, I mean, how can you model that? Or who can model that? From 2017 until today, we have legal cases, the legal cases coming from to the green energy investors or whatever, they have doubled. From 800, they went to 2,200. Most of them are in the US. But still, they're coming into Europe because we know that everything is starting from the US, especially legal cases, and then coming into Europe. So how can you cover those? Because at the end of the day, there are investment managers, look at the chain, investment managers taking decisions to invest in companies who invest in green energy. Now, investments sometimes go wrong. So there's class actions going back all the way to the managers of these investments. And they must have insurance in order to protect their own assets. So if there is no insurance available, they can't take the right decisions. And that's a vicious circle. So whichever way you look at it, I mean, as in the insurance industry, we're trying to make every effort to cover all these risks, but we have to understand them. And as a closing remark, I think what is the most important thing is to have a strategic partnership with the industry. The manufacturers, the governments, the financiers, and the insurance need to come and have a strategic partnership to understand and respond in these challenges that we have. Because at the end of the day, it's a timing issue. We have to run it fast, and we have to respond fast. So without strategic partnerships, this is going to be very hard. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dimitri. You definitely gave us a broad, overview of the importance of insurance in this business, and in the part of the energy transition, which now I will turn my question to Valerie. From the very beginning, when we started this Energy Transition Symposium, the Global Gas Center has shown a lot of interest to participate and support our discussions. And I'm saying this because we have heard even this morning that yes, indeed, the energy transition means a lot of green investments in renewable energy sources, in wind and sun. But natural gas plays a very key role in that. And we have seen it, especially when we are looking at the specific case of each country, where we know that the energy system of every single country, even at our European Union level, is completely different. As the ambassador said, lignite operations, lignite plants are shutting down here, so we are decarbonizing through that means. But at the same time, we have other countries like France, as you know very well, where the target for renewables in Greece is 80%, in France is 30%, because nuclear is kind of dominating there. In this play, natural gas has a very key role to play. And I think we have been hearing in the past natural gas as the bridge to the energy transition. You never liked that expression, as most of the members of the gas center. So where do we see natural gas now, especially with the change in the business model, where we see more and more LNG coming in? Is it on?
Do you hear me? Yeah. Kostas, do you allow me to say that natural gas is a green energy? I think it's important. At the Global Gas Center, we have it's a platform of gas company, energy companies from all over the world. I'm just back from Indonesia for the Energy Week because Indonesia was the hosting country, and we see LNG is part of the equation. We cannot say it's a bridge fuel or whatever. The bridge, we don't know what it means. It's part of the equation. And when we are talking about, I like what you just mentioned, strategic partnership. Strategic partnership, it is a key element when we are talking about energy. We all know that we need to invest in renewable energy everywhere as far as we can. But we need a backup. If you are in Bangladesh, if you are in Indonesia, if you are in Greece, if you are in France, we need a backup. Sometimes, you mentioned France, it's nuclear, fine. Other country, it's a gas. But gas is everywhere needed. In the Global Gas Center, we have two US big companies that are members, Cheniere and Tellurian. When we see the investment of Cheniere this year in Europe, they just signed two major contracts with Equinor and just recently in Germany with BASF. I think they are key players for the energy transition. And we all know that we will need, I'm sorry to say that, but fossil molecules for the coming decades. And as you were talking about investment, we need investment in infrastructure. Otherwise, we all know that the social acceptabilities of the price of energy in Europe is a key element. Look at what's going on in the UK, in other countries. We need to have an affordable energy, but it's not something virtual. What does it mean, affordable energy? When we see everywhere, I'm living in Switzerland, in the 1st of January 2024, there will be an increase in all electricity bills. Even in Switzerland, which is a rich country, how are we going to do that? So we need gas as an affordable energy, and we have strategic partners like the US, but of course we need to diversify all kinds of resources, and the security of supply in Europe is key. Greece as well, for sure.
Thank you, Valerie. I will turn it back to the ambassador, and based on what we have heard as well, where do you see the main sectors of focus from US companies when we're looking at the Greek market? Is it more towards the green investments, infrastructure, or still is infrastructure related to natural gas, for example, or natural gas power plants?
Well, it's a little of both. It's certainly not lignite, and it's certainly moving towards decarbonization. So our DFC has been in Greece often, looking at energy, but looking through energy with a preference through a decarbonization lens. There are proposed investments that are electrical interconnectors that can start producing energy through a fossil fuel and then transition to producing electricity through renewables. And we think that's consistent with where the world should be going. It's going to transition. LNG is in reality, because it's important to keep the lights on and the operating rooms and hospitals working and factories working. LNG is going to be part of the energy mix for many, many years. I personally do not believe that the enemy of the perfect should be the vast improvement. I would love to live in the world where we could have everything renewable, but the sun doesn't always shine. It's not always windy, and LNG is going to be a part of the energy mix for many, many years to come. So it's important that we rid ourselves from lignite and coal as quickly as possible and continue the transition to decarbonization and sustainability. U.S. companies are making investments everywhere in Greece. Not only are LNG tankers coming into the Vrettou, not only will they come into, at the end of the year, they'll come into the FSRU in Alexandroupolis. That the U.S. is the largest LNG provider to Greece now, and that percentage is increasing exponentially as the Russian number is coming down. But they're making huge investments. I mean, Amoresco 547 is making huge investments in renewables in Greece. And by the way, I'm proud of the work that Greece and the ministry is doing. They are a top 10 country in Europe in renewables. I had a meeting 2 weeks ago with the Minister of Energy and Environment and his staff, and they were very focused on offshore wind, as they thought that was the future. I mean, the amount of gigawatts that they're looking to bring into the system, and much more than they need for domestic use, but with an eye on being an energy exporter to not only accommodate their domestic use, but the Greeks understand very well that they need to help other countries to the north, whether it's reverse flow, whether it's creating a south to north corridor for electricity, LNG. They need to help their neighbors. Bulgaria would not have gotten through the winter if it wasn't for Greece. Greece is now beginning the process of reverse flowing into Macedonia. I think you will see the Greeks playing a leading role as with the help of not only its European allies and investments in European allies, but also the Americans, as foreign direct investment in this country, particularly in energy, is at a record high. So the Greeks are not only leaders in renewables, in energy transition, in energy sustainability. The Greeks are not only a leader in becoming an energy hub and exporter for Southeast Europe. They're understanding that to have European integration of the Balkan countries, they need to play a leadership role in terms of economic investment, in terms of diplomacy, economic diplomacy, but also in terms of energy diplomacy. And I'm very excited about Greece's prospects in doing just that.
Thank you very much. If I may ask now, Valerie, something related to greening of natural gas in our system. There are EU directives that are coming. There is a lot of discussion about biogas or green, methane, with certain percentages as well that would be obligatory from a certain point in time, relatively soon, if I understand well. So, do you think it's a reality? Is something that can happen? Can we actually decarbonize the natural gas world?
This is exactly what I wanted to say before your question, but this is in the same line. We will manage, or the energy transition will be a success, and only if we decarbonize the natural gas value chain. And this is the only way to move forward in this direction. We need to decarbonize from exploration to the end of the value chain. We need to inject in the grids all kinds of gases, renewable gases, e-gases, And we have the infrastructure in Europe. So we need to use all the investment that has been made on this continent to have a grid that comes from the north to the south, to the east from the west, and reverse flow. We need to use this grid to decarbonize and to inject renewable gases. So for sure, that's we need to increase, and it's in line with the EU new regulation, but we need to adapt. Of course, it will create jobs, it will create a new, I would say, cooperation. All the value chain of methanization, we see that all the discussion that we have with agriculture sector, it's new for natural gas sector. But we have to work closely together to decarbonize and put renewable gases in the grid. Another point I want to mention, if you allow me, Kostas, is the role of LNG in shipping industries and maritime transport. This is a key element, and here we are in Greece. You have a lot of shippers, and the shipping industry is huge and very important. LNG as a fuel and is something very important, and we need to do everything we can to increase the role of LNG in this sector as well.
Yeah, sure, Ambassador. Yeah.
That's the point I wish I made. As we've been very, very active in that, with the advent of Skaramagas coming back to life and Elefsina coming back to life, if the Greek shipping community were a country, it would be the 8th largest carbon emitter in the world. That's how substantial the Greek shipping industry is. And I first met with him with Secretary Kerry, who came here to discuss what is the new energy source. And you saw the Greek shipping community really come to life and getting creative as they know that they have to be the leaders in this. So as you have a medium and long-term solution to decarbonize their energy source, let me tell you what they're doing in the short term. They're buying new ships. The amount of new vessels that the Greeks are buying is unspeakable. It's in the tens of billions of euros annually. But I'll tell you something else that's happening right here in Greece. You can bring an older ship and its midlife, its midlife upgrades. Bring them into Elefsina, and if you refurbish it, it could reduce that carbon footprint by 30%. It can make it 30% more efficient. And this is important work that's already has begun. You know, in terms of, you talked about the electrical grid and LNG and such, technology is moving very, very fast. And I'm hoping one day soon that we see carbon capture becomes economically efficient enough that we can utilize it everywhere. So I'm excited about the future. And folks, I'm less concerned. I'm not concerned about Greece, and I'm not concerned about Switzerland, and I'm not concerned about France. You know, we really have to show greater concern. If we don't get the global South to buy into this, no matter what we do, we will not fix this problem. And as you know, I now live in my own country has experienced wildfires and floods. And the country in which I live in today, that my parents were raised in, has now experienced unprecedented climate change disasters in terms of forest fires and floods. You know, these 100-year occurrences are now occurring every 3 years. This is real. You know, this is intrinsic scientific data. This isn't a fallacy. This needs to be addressed, but it's only going to be addressed if we get the entirety of the global community to understand that we have to work together to fix this.
To have something to add, maybe I'll give the floor to Dimitris just to say a comment. And then
one remark on the on how things work. It's quite interesting. You mentioned the shipping industry. We had a big group recently that wanted to invest in the carbon credits market, and they wanted to address specifically the shipping industry. They had to model the credit worthiness of every ship, who is a single company who you cannot actually model. So we went into parametric, which is something that insurance industry is looking now to address a lot of the issues, to credit wrap that and enable the investment for the shipping community. And now suddenly you have, even if you don't have the actual investment into ships, which is going to take time to be to reduce their footprint, they can get products that will enable investments into other areas for green for the green transition. So it's quite interesting how everything works together in this. Yes.
Yeah. You have to come to Geneva for the. I'm working closely with the UN as well, and we're talking a lot about investment and green investment and so on. And frankly speaking, you have to raise your voice. The shipping industry, and we need investment, and you are doing a lot of things, but you need to be in a way more visible. That's important for Greece because I know what's going on. I just want to follow up on what you mentioned about the Global South. Yes, the Global South, we even in the view of the COP28 in December, we see nowadays this kind of gap between what the IEA is saying, what the OPEC is saying, and we need to find a consensus. Saying, look, if you live in Denmark, as you mentioned, the energy transition, it will be quite easy to reach the target. If you live in Indonesia, if you live in Philippines, or if you live in Senegal or the Global South, the story is different. And they need to use their own resources. And here in this spectrum, of course, renewables is very, very important. And at the same time, they need gas, they need LNG, and they need investment to develop this infrastructure, for sure. Yeah.
So you provide a very good paradox of examples, as I believe Denmark has a population of maybe 5 or 6 million, and Indonesia has a population of 277 million. China and India are north of 1.4 billion. Nigeria is about 230 million. And you know, let's go on to Brazil and whatnot. So the populations are much greater, and there is certainly budget constraints there as well. It is a challenge that we're going to have to address. I'm hoping that technology also helps that. I'm reminded of credit cards. In the United States, we had an infrastructure where we put the credit card on something, put a paper over it, and slide it through. You can tell that I was a waiter. My father had a restaurant. And then you would go to a less developed country, and because the infrastructure was brand new, you know, they had the fob and everything because it was installed much later. So I'm hoping that sort of transition takes place in those countries. I want to say one final thing in terms of shipping. It has to have a global response. Shipping is global. 90% of the GDP of the world is transported through ships. So you cannot have a local answer to what the new energy source is. Let's say, for example, that green hydrogen is the energy source of the future of dry cargo ships and LNG tankers and whatnot. Well, you need to make sure that every port in the world, from Indonesia to Colombia to the Philippines to Seattle, has green hydrogen to be able to make sure that these ships around the world are able to intake energy to go. So that's a huge opportunity, but there's going to have to be we're going to have to pick a technology that's functional, that works, and we're going to have to build out a global infrastructure to be able to transition to something like green hydrogen. Something in that nature would be a massive move forward in decarbonization.
Yeah, that's true. I don't know, Valerie, do you would like to add something on this?
Yeah.
Because,
To follow up on what you just said on hydrogen, when we see the very recent deal with CMA, CGM, and Merckx on hydrogen as a fuel, that's very important. And for sure, we have to make sure that every port in the world has the infrastructure. Otherwise, it has no sense just to speak on that just in Europe and a few countries. That the shipping industry, as you mentioned, is just global. And we need to be sure that this debate and the investment arrive at the right place. That's something very important. I've just, as I said, in September, I was in Indonesia, and they are seeking for investment to come to the right place, right pockets, if I may say. But that's very important. And this is a role of governments, of regulators, to facilitate all this investment and not to say, no, you don't have to invest in this and that. When we are talking about a lot on social, I would say, debate on inclusivity, when I'm talking about inclusivity in energy, it's, yes, we need to get rid of coal, for sure, at a pace where the country, it's possible for them to move away from coal. But we need to invest in all this kind of energy, and we need all investors, for sure.
Sorry, Mr. Julie, did you want to say?
I want to, something you learn in business school is you want a proof of concept. Greece is perfectly situated to prove the concept with a closed loop system by doing it locally within its ferries. Because the ferry can literally, they can leave Lavrio or Piraeus and they can go to Santorini or Rhodes and then come back and refuel. That refuel could be hydrogen because it's closed loop. If it works here in Greece, and Greece has an opportunity to be the leader and to test it, and we should encourage and incentivize, and I'm asking the EU to put their money where their mouth is, to develop ferry boats in Greece with a new renewable energy source, and we'll test it in a closed loop. And if it works here in a closed loop, let's move to expand it globally. I apologize.
No, that's fine. That's fine. You mentioned Indonesia, and this is a real case. We had 6 months ago, we had a group, an international group, that wanted to invest in a forest in Indonesia, $500 million for the, obviously for the credit, carbon credits, and we had to make sure that this investment was enabled. Because you have the political risk, you have the credit risk, you have the catastrophic risk from wildfires. There's a chain of other things that came across, and it's not insurance, it's capital. Capital has to respond to all the various chains, because if capital does, if investors are willing but insurers are not, it's not going to work, and vice versa. So that's back to the strategic partnerships to solve these kind of problems.
But sometimes we are hearing a lot of debate on investment, on to respect the ESG criteria and so on. And what is your position on that? Because we are talking about here investing in LNG infrastructure, in shipping industry. Does it match with all these debates of ESG criteria, according to you? Yes, you.
To me?
Yeah.
Well, they're trying. Whether they can measure it is a different issue. I mean, the problem we have, especially in Greece, although we're trying more and more and more, is you're coming back and saying, well, to a landlord, well, I would like to measure my carbon footage for the building. And they're saying, what? So it's coming there, but we're trying, but it has to be a global effort, I guess.
You're not going to solve this without getting private industry. And private industry is not going to be able to create the solutions for the 21st century if governments don't get involved. Because if you think there are challenges to ensure these things, there are even greater challenges to finance these things that are speculative. Now, if someone is a banker, they're not looking to finance something that is speculative. So, the Hellenic Development Bank is going to be unleashed as Greece has recognized that we have to help facilitate startups in this country, and startups that are going to do exactly this kind of work. But this has to be a public-private partnership where governments and development banks help finance small startups that are going to create the next great technology, but they're going to need some seed capital to do so.
We need the proof of concept, as you just said, and we can make it happen here. There are a lot of initiatives, even at the European level. The Commission has set up now the Hydrogen Bank, which could also be a good facility for any green hydrogen projects that we do know are not very viable, economically speaking, today on a standalone basis, or for green ammonia. We have, as far as Greece is concerned, there is a pocket of money which can be a bit more than 2 billion euro now for the decarbonization of the Greek islands, which would have been an excellent case for what the ambassador said earlier about, and Valerie, about the ports. So, cold ironing on ports. So instead of having the, ships burning the shipping fuel, we can plug them in the port, or try to see alternatives as hydrogen or ammonia as a green fuel for short sea shipping primarily, or ferries around the Greek islands. So there are a lot of different tools that are unfortunately still under development. We have not seen something very concrete, and it would be a major opportunity even for this government, for our time now, for the next 4 to 5 years, to actually, implement something like that with all the stakeholders. So this concept of public-private partnership is a must, I think, because the private sector is the one that will be driving this. We need the banks as well, because they will be asked to finance part of it, at least at certain point in time. And just a positive note on Greece's developments recently, which touches upon all of what we have said, is the upgrading of our rating recently, which we are expecting to have it even more formal from the major credit rating agencies very soon, which will allow a lot of funds to participate in our country, invest in our in Greece, and not only in the energy sector, but of course, obviously, this will be one of them. And see some major leaps, if you wish, in the investment profile of Greece. But before my comment, I thought that you had a point to make, Valeria, as well. Yeah? Maybe a last round of comments, if we...
No, I just want to make the final comment on, dear Ambassador, what you just mentioned, the role of banks. But if we want as well to have a global picture of the world, we need to reform urgently the IMF and the World Bank in order to sorry, but it's a must if we want to help this country to embark on the same journey of the global north, if we say that.
Yes.
I'm going to politely sidestep that one. I'm only an ambassador for 16 months. We'll have quite the conversation after that. Look, thank you for attending this. My friend and I were teasing each other as to whose commentary would be more boring, mine on carbon capture, his on insurance. But it's important work. This is the first time that we're going to leave our children a world that is less well off at the one that we inherited. And we have a responsibility to do better. As we've made so many technological advancements in oncology and medicines, and private companies now sending people to space, and satellites, and AI and quantum computing, that we need to put that sort of commitment into making sure that our planet is safe and resilient. And a lot of that comes from decarbonization. We have to make sure that it is not only the right thing to do, but it is also the economically prudent thing to do. And I think technology in terms of carbon capture and investments, and we talked about green hydrogen, we talked about moving away from lignite. I mean, LNG is already cheaper than lignite, but as the price of renewables is coming down, it will be in everyone's best interest, not only their social interests, but their economic interests to do so. We just have to make sure that as you push upon this, I pull upon this, and that we all make sure that as we gather today, as a group of professionals, a group of activists that are very concerned in seeing energy transition, energy diversification, sustainability, decarbonization, that the work continues. The problem exists. And that someday soon we will gather in a room to say, mission accomplished. We are living in a world where the entirety of nations has embraced decarbonization, and that we are a zero carbon footprint world. That, of course, is not today, but that is the work that has to be done. And I thank you for your commitment to doing this. The first, the first thing we do is we show up and we show an interest and we get involved. So thank you for this.
Dimitri, final comment?
You mentioned, I'll take the what the ambassador said, the push and pull. It's a chain, and it has to work as a chain, and everyone has a part in that chain. And if one doesn't play the role, the chain is broken. So I guess push and pull, and let's all make an effort for that chain.
So we'll continue the dialogue. I would like to thank you very much for this very insightful and lively discussion that we had. Thank you very much.
Thank you.